Good evening. I'm quite impressed that we have such a large group of people that would come to the event today, this roadmap to financial independence and kind of a how-to for young people and caring adults. I'm Dwayne Carter, Senior Vice President. I have responsibility for a number of areas in the bank, including OMWI, who actually is sponsoring this event. And I want to introduce a couple people who have done a lot of work to make this event come together. And so first, I want to talk about you, the parents, and also the high school juniors and seniors that are spending this quality time with us. And we're confident you'll get a lot out of the program. And we learn a lot from you in terms of your experiences, your interests, and what we can do better. And also your questions will challenge us to think even more deeply about these issues that the Federal Reserve Bank cares deeply about. This is something I always like to use this slide because it's always kind of interesting because we always talk about the future is always oversold and it's always under-imagined. And today I had a chance to listen to this recorded speech from the president of Apple Computer, actually the CEO, Tom Cook. And he talked about his time in college. And he had this assignment to write a plan for the next 25 years of his life. And so he wrote this plan, and he so happened, 30 years later, looks back on the plan for his life and to see, did I really follow this road? Was this the right map? And as he looked at it, he kind of laughed because the first 18 months were pretty close. But after that, not even remotely close to what his life turned out to be. And of course, the CEO of Apple. And the one thing he said, the journey was not predictable at all. The only thing you can do is prepare. There's a lot of things that will happen in your life. The world will change, relationships will change, but you have to continue to prepare, and that's what this night is all about. What I'd like you to take a look at, and this is from 2011, and probably the current data will show you the exact same thing, that if you take a look to your left and you look at unemployment rates by education, whether a person has a high school diploma or they have a doctoral degree. Basically, the more education you had, the lower your unemployment was going to be during that time period. If you took a quick look at compensation, you can see that basically education at the end of the day really does pay. And so that's one of the reasons that we really are focused on that as part of this event. There are three methods we may learn wisdom. And I like to always show these really quickly: reflection, imitation, and experience. I can just tell you that last part, experience, which is the bitterest, because that's where you learn from sometimes failure, sometimes really painful situations in life. But if you come out the other side and you've learned from it, you really do grow. I always like this. Michelangelo, he's one of my favorites. Every block of stone, every block of marble, something that's inside. I'm about to turn this over to our fabulous St. Paul Central interns. This has been a great year, and it's been a great relationship. We've actually worked with St. Paul Central since 2003. And basically every year, 25 college-bound students actually have an opportunity to go over there and have some informational sessions. And also at the end of the program, we have different speakers that work inside the Federal Reserve Bank that talk about our organization and talk about the opportunities that are out there for these students. And then 4 lucky students get a chance to work at the Federal Reserve Bank during the summer months. And first I always say 4 lucky students, but I think we're actually the lucky ones, because this is one bright, talented group that you're going to see and listen to what they've been able to do today in terms of their presentation and what they've put together. I'm going to turn it now over to these wonderful St. Paul Central interns.
With 25.6 million teens in the United States, how much do you think they spend annually?
So by a show of hands, how many of you guys think it is over $1 million?
3 million.
500 million.
In fact, students across the U.S. spend about $204.72 billion. That's right, I said over $200 billion annually, all from teenagers across the U.S.
Tonight, we're going to talk to you about financial literacy, and we'll also guide you through our roadmap to financial independence.
So to introduce ourselves, I'll start. I'm Kafaya,
I'm Jackie.
I'm Yasmin.
And I'm Minette.
and I'll be talking about what is financial independence. So financial independence is reaching a point where one is completely in control of their income and also being 100% stable financially.
Now let's move on to the question, why is financial literacy important? Well, financial literacy applies to everyone. It does not matter what your race is, your educational background, your age, gender. All of that is irrelevant. It assists you in reaching your financial goals. This could mean buying a new phone, a new laptop, a car, buying a house, family planning later on in your life, or even retiring to that exotic, beautiful beach when you're 70 years old.
And so now I'm going to start off our 7 steps to financial independence, beginning with number 1. Start saving early because every penny counts. Nobody expects to get rich overnight. I mean, it's almost unrealistic. And so the thing is that you have to remember that you need to be patient. Your wealth is going to grow slowly but surely. You just need to trust that it will. And so as long as you're saving, it doesn't matter how big of an amount or how small of an amount. As long as you're saving, that's what really matters.
Step 2, select a money mentor, one who is close to you, trustworthy, and responsible. Your money mentor could be your parents, your older siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents, or any sort of financial advisor. Along with 77% of teenagers that say that they look up to their parents, I also look up to my parents when it comes to money management because I know for a fact that they've been there and they know more about money management than I do right now. Another thing to keep in mind is to also surround yourself with people who will influence your financial decisions in a positive way. So, for instance, avoid going to the mall with that one friend who always peer pressures you into buying those shoes that you really don't need.
Step 3, create a budget and set goals for your money management. When teens think of a budget, they think of something that's extremely difficult and hard and not possible to complete, but it really is not that hard. All you have to do is write down on a piece of paper, scratch paper, post-it note, does not matter. Just write down what you spent your money on, how much money you spent, and where that money actually went. So you have an idea of where your money is going and how much you have to spend throughout the year. And it really is not that hard. So write down how much money you've been spending. It does not matter if it's $1 or $2, just write it down.
Step 4, open up a savings account. You may not think you need it now, but you will in the future. So savings is important because you get to kind of keep track of the money that you're actually spending and then the money that you're actually saving. And also saving your money can help with more long-term goals, such as buying a laptop when you're going off to college, like I will be doing this fall, or also maybe buying your first car when you first get your license. So savings helps, and make sure you take advantage of student savings accounts that are available at different banks.
Step 5, do not borrow money or take loans that you know you cannot pay back. So even now, be careful about the money that you borrow from your parents or from your siblings or maybe even friends. It's important to start implementing these small habits that are good for you and are going to be able to help you when you become an adult, and it's going to ensure that you will have good credit when you're older. So it's good to start learning about these things now. Members of the class of 2013 are graduating with an average of over $35,000 worth of college-related debt, and of those, 39% wish that they could have done things differently. So it's important to start making decisions today that are going to help you in the future. So when you're making a decision today, remember that to think about how it's going to affect you in the future. Is it going to harm you or is it going to be beneficial for you?
Step 6, know the difference between your wants and your needs, and don't buy anything based on impulse. So I know a lot of us will see something really cool and really flashy at the store and we'll want it right away. But that's just your feeling of, you want that feeling of instant gratification. And so personally, I experience that a lot. And what I like to do, is I like to take a night or two and sleep on it. And if after those few nights I still want it, then I'll go for it. But usually what happens is I'm going to lose that desire for it. And then I'll be like, okay, then that's fine. Then I don't have to spend money on something that I'm going to regret later. And in fact, teens everywhere are thinking like this now, because 55% of teens say they wait for items to go on sale. So it's that wanting to save money even if you really want something. 50% are making fewer impulse purchases. So like I talked about, just taking the time to think about it and really knowing if you want it or not. And finally, 42% are more likely to comparison shop for the best price. And so if you really shop around, you'll find the same item a little cheaper, and usually then you'll save more money, and then it'll be more of a bargain for you.
And last but not least, step 7, take advantage of free money opportunities that you will get while you're young, such as post-secondary enrollment options. Your school may not offer this, but if your school does, take advantage of this opportunity. It's basically when you go to a college campus, you take the college classes and get college credit at no cost to you. Second, college in the schools. If you do not want to leave your high school but still want to get that college credit, you can take college classes in your high school and still at no cost to you. Grants, that's free money from the government. You have to apply for that through FAFSA. It's an online process, and you do that every year. And scholarships are important. The applications are long, tedious, boring. They'll take months to complete, but you can go to college for free with scholarships, as I am. I'm going to college for free because I've applied. I took the time 5-6 months to really perfect those applications, and I got a full ride. So you can do it too. Honestly, I can do it. You can do it too. Also, free student checking accounts are important because they're free. And I made the mistake of not taking advantage of that when I first got my first bank account, because I honestly didn't know what I was getting myself into. I just needed a bank account. And so the banker knew that and took advantage of my vulnerability, and he steered me into getting a regular checking and savings account. So every month they were taking out $10 a month, and I had no idea, and it was charging me overdraft fees. And so after a year, they took over $100 away from me, and I finally changed it to a student checking account, and I've never had to face that problem. So don't go through the route that I did. Just ask about the student checking accounts.
Once again, here are 7 steps to financial independence. As long as you follow these simple steps, you'll find yourself in a much happier financial situation. 1, save early. 2, seek a money mentor. 3, create a budget plan. 4, open a savings account. 5, borrow wisely. 6, don't be impulsive. And 7, take advantage of free money.
Well, that's it. Thank you guys for your time and your attention. We hope that you guys learned something from this, and we hope that you guys enjoy the rest of your night here at the Fed.
And if you have any questions, please write them down, like you will be writing down your budget plan, right? And bring them to the student session later on, and we'll answer all of your questions there. Thank you.
Yep. And now that we focused on these 7 steps, we'd like to highlight the importance that you guys have towards your own financial success. And so, because it is all about you, so I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Joe Mann from the Public Affairs Department. He will be speaking to you guys about practical ways of building wealth and building wealth within yourself. So please help me welcome up Joe Mann.
I have just a few short minutes here, but it's okay because I don't have that much to cover with you. So I'm an economist here in our public affairs department. I'm not going to spend a lot of time boring you with the details of what that means. There's a lot of different things that fall under the window of being an economist. Basically, I spend a lot of time looking at charts and numbers. And that might not sound terribly interesting to a lot of you, but I find it fascinating. And let me just say, I really enjoyed going around the room earlier and talking to a lot of the young people in the room about what their plans were for the future. Because I can tell you that there was a certain point in my life when I was in college that I didn't just not think I would end up being an economist. I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to. I was certain that I wasn't going to, and pretty sure that I didn't want to. And yet, I actually was a journalist, and I studied journalism. And then I started working here at the Fed, and sort of slowly over time, my role here kind of changed. And what I discovered that this was something that I both was good at and that I really enjoyed. And they kind of put that opportunity before me, and they said, "You want to step into this role?" And I took it. And so my point is that it's great that you all have career objectives in front of you and that you have goals in mind, but those things can change, and in a lot of ways change for the better. So be prepared for that. That's like sort of the one kernel of wisdom that I'm going to leave you with tonight. Now, I'm going to talk about investment, which is something that economists think about a lot. And people, when you say the word investment, tend to think in terms of buying stocks or maybe like a business buying machinery, those things that we call capital, useful things that are useful for producing goods and services. But I'm going to be talking about a little bit more abstract kind of investment, what we call in economics, we call human capital, which is as our economy develops and we become more and more technologically advanced society, the most important form of capital, of investment, is actually what's in here, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. So basically what I'm going to do is just run down a little bit about what we know from the data about the relationship between education and income, and Dwayne already covered a lot of that for me, which is good. In fact, he put up a chart, which I didn't have a chart for, so I'm glad he covered that. We'll just keep that real short and say that more education corresponds to more income. We all know that, but the relationship is a little bit more complicated than that, so I'll talk about that a little bit. Mostly what I want to do is leave you all with the impression that you have a very bright future ahead of you. There's a lot of really sort of scary news when you hear about the economy on TV. You get the impression the economy is really bad, and that maybe your future isn't going to be as bright as your parents had in front of them when they were your age. And I want to tell you that that's not true at all. In fact, it's just the opposite of that. If you sort of just pay attention to think about these basic principles for how to think about investing in yourself, you should be very optimistic for the future. So college is something that you all have on your horizon, and it's something that, in spite of the ability to potentially get scholarships and get someone else to pay for it, which is great if you can do that, if you want to put the time in, which is not a trivial investment, filling out forms, as you just heard. But nonetheless, someone has to pay for it, and it's very expensive, and it's getting more and more expensive every year. So there's this question about whether or not it's actually worth it to go to college. And the simple answer is yeah, and you saw that already. More education corresponds to higher income. So over time, this is something that pays for itself. But just like any other investment, you have to spend money to make money. And you have to realize that it's something that you have to pay a lot up front and kind of wait for a long time for the reward to vest. And how well that investment pays off depends on a lot of other decisions you make. And that's why the complex answer is that it sort of depends. The other thing to keep in mind is that not all college educations are created equal. There's a lot of different things you can study in college. I have a list here in front of me of the highest paying, they're the top 10 highest paying college degrees in 2010. The highest paying is computer engineering. The second highest paying is chemical engineering. Computer engineering, just so you know, that's at the top of the list. And the average starting salary for people who study computer engineering was $70,000 a year, right out of college. Which is a lot more than I made right out of college, incidentally. Chemical engineering is number 2. Computer science is number 3. Aerospace engineering is number 4. Is anybody picking up a theme here? Engineering tends to pay pretty well. It's also something that requires a pretty narrow set of skills. You have to be good quantitatively. You have to like sort of creative, problem-solving kind of tasks. And it's something that, it kind of sort of takes a certain sort of mind. Civil engineering is on there. Finance is one of the top 10 paying. So for those of you who are considering business school, economics is very high paying. But a lot of these top degrees are in engineering. If you look at what some of the lowest paying degrees are, they're they're humanities type of degrees by and large. Things like fine arts. I'm not discouraging any of you from studying art in college, but know that artists, even though they end up being famous, and we had a quote from Michelangelo earlier, and he died 500 years ago, so obviously he made a pretty big impact on the world. But artists aren't known for making a lot of money while they're alive, so keep that in mind. Sociology is a fascinating thing to study, but there aren't a lot of paying sociologist positions out there. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't study those things. It just means that if you want to study those things, you need to think about what other sorts of career skills you're going to pick up in the course of either of your education or elsewhere. So with kind of those scary things in mind, I'm going to talk a little bit about the job market now. And like I said earlier, it's not as bad as you may have been given the impression. What I'm showing you here, this kind of breaks down where we saw growth in jobs in 2012, and I'm comparing Minnesota, which is in kind of the purple color, go Vikings, I guess, and the United States, which is in that blue bar. I'm a Lions fan, incidentally, so but go Vikings. And so you can see that some of the fields that had the most job growth, actually construction was sort of surprising, but I would ignore that for the time being. Education and health services, there's a huge demand for nursing and for other jobs in the health fields. Professional and business services, that's a lot of you who might be studying things like accounting, financial activities. Those are sort of the faster growing jobs both in Minnesota and nationwide. So, but one thing that you can pick up from looking at this picture, in terms of percentage terms, across a broad array of industries, there was positive job growth, both in Minnesota and nationwide. So to a certain extent, you're looking at a pretty positive picture, regardless of what your career is in terms of employment prospects. And so that's even considering 2012 wasn't one of the strongest years that we've ever had. So in any given year, there's a lot of people get hired and a lot of people leave the labor force. And so being young, this actually bodes pretty well for you. And this is kind of what I'm going to try and show you in this slide. So what this is basically, these three different colored bars on this slide, the columns, are showing you the percentage of the labor force that falls into this given age category. In 1970 versus 2010 and what we expect it to be in 2020. The takeaway from this, there's a lot of columns in here, but the point to take away from this is that being young right now is really good. Because if you go back to 1970, more than 20% of the labor force fell in that category of being 16 to 24 years old. In 2020, in another 7 years, when a lot of you will still be in that category, it's going to be just over 10% of the labor force. So what this shows you, if you look at this over time, you can see that the columns that represent older workers have gotten taller and the columns that represent younger workers have gotten shorter. And what that means is our labor force is getting older. What does that mean for you? Why do I say that this is good if you're a young person? It means that sooner or later those older people are going to retire. And they're gonna leave the jobs that they've been in, and that's gonna be just a very rapid ladder that you can climb up because there's just this demographic wave of retirements coming up. So when people try and kind of scare you about the economy and get you worried about the economic picture for after you graduate high school, know that that's not something that's going to be true long term. You have a very bright future ahead of you long term. This is a sort of complicated relationship. We call the Beveridge curve. The point of this is that what we see right now, so this shows you the relationship between the unemployment rate and the amount of job openings, that is, like, say, the amount of help wanted ads that are out there. And what you can see right now is that what we have is that the unemployment rate has started coming down, and the amount of job openings has been coming up, but given where we are in terms of the amount of jobs that are open right now, we would expect unemployment to be a lot lower. The takeaway from this slide is that in terms of the historical relationship between the amount of people who are looking for a job and the amount of job openings there's kind of a big gap. You wouldn't expect there to be so many people looking for jobs right now. And what does that tell us? It means that there's a lot of job openings right now that employers are not finding workers with the skills that they're looking for. There's a skills gap between between the jobs that are open and the skills that workers have. And so this gets to my final point about how to invest in yourself and what I really mean by human capital. It means developing the skills that you need to be desirable to a potential employer. That means sort of two things. I mean, there's kind of two sets of skills. One is professional skills. So I talk here about database programming or welding, if you're good with your hands. Those are all practical skills that you can learn either in college or in a trade school. And those are things that you can also learn on the job, too, if you have an employer who's willing to train you. But there's also this kind of broader, fuzzier category that we call soft skills. And those are things like showing up to work on time, showing up to work at all, knowing that if you're not going to show up at work, you need to call first. This is tremendously important. And we hear a lot from employers that, boy, we would hire twice as many people as we've been hiring if only, the people who we're hiring right now, they don't know how to deal with conflict in the workplace. This is especially true of younger people who communicate a lot on email and text, and a lot of you may have broken up with your boyfriend or girlfriend via text message. That's not something that used to be acceptable to do in the past, and so there's these sort of barriers of communication that are kind of creating a bit of a generation gap in the workplace. So I would highly encourage you to kind of work on your communication, and what the sort of interpersonal skills are really in a lot of ways just as important as these kind of more technical skills. So like I said, conflict resolution, just sort of basic problem-solving ability, knowing how to conduct yourself, how to conduct yourself in a professional manner, the way to dress in the workplace. These are things that we hear are kind of soft skills that there's a big demand for right now. So the fact that you're here and you're young people who are interested in working in a professional atmosphere means like you're pretty ahead of the curve. So again, future's pretty bright for you. So with all that in mind, how should we think about how to invest in yourself? Well, education, like I've said, is a form of investment. It doesn't necessarily have to be going to college. It can be a professional, a 2-year degree, and it can mean a lot of education beyond college. You shouldn't just expect to stop learning when you graduate college. You should expect to be a lifetime learner, because that becomes more and more important when the jobs that we have that are available are based on creative thinking and on problem solving. You need to prepare to be a lifelong worker, and also do the things that you can to develop these soft skills. Getting up and speaking in front of an audience like our interns just did just now. That's a phenomenal thing to do. So when I say social networking IRL, not just using social media on the internet, but actually improving your social skills in person. These are all things that you can do to invest in yourself, both in terms of human and social capital. But regardless, the one thing I want to leave you with tonight is that main message, that the outlook for you is very good, especially that you're this kind of self-selected group of people who are really interested in your future. You're going to do really well for yourself. Good luck, and enjoy the rest of the sessions tonight.